Okay, if I could bring the meeting to order, please. And a very warm welcome to those attending the Major Applications Planning Committee and our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell and I am the Chairman of this evening's meeting. Details of the business to be considered this evening are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible online underneath the live broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to anybody speaking today that your voice will only be audible when the microphone is switched on. In terms of a fire alarm this evening, we are not expecting one, so if the alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For mobile devices and tablets, for those in the room, can I ask that you switch them off or put them onto silence? And please note that councillors and officers this evening may be using their tablets or laptops to view the agenda paperwork. Meeting feedback is also available for those in the public gallery. There are some forms that you can complete, and for those watching online there is a link for feedback directly underneath the broadcast. Okay, that's some of the Chairman's announcements. I'm now going to introduce tonight's attendees. So I'd like to start with Councillor Higgins, our Vice Chairman. We also have Councillor Duncan, our Opposition Lead. We have Councillor Chapman, Councillor Cawthorne, Councillor Mathers and Councillor Yarrow. Those are this evening's voting members, but we're also supported very well by officers of the Council. And we have the Deputy Director of Planning and Regeneration, James Roger. We have our Strategic and Major Planning Officer, Mandip Malhotra. We have our Transport and Planning Officer, Alan Tilley. We have our Legal Advisor this evening, Nicole Cameron. And the person who keeps us all in check is our Democratic Services Officer this evening, Anisha Tedji. So good evening to both councillors and officers. Now I can go into the main agenda for this evening, and we'll start with agenda item 1, apologies for absence, Anisha.
No apologies, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. A full house. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest in matters before the meeting this evening. Councillor Cawthorne.
Not actually a declaration of interest, but I would just like to state for the record that in respect of items 6 and 7 on the agenda, in my time in Cabinet I had some involvement in the early stages of these projects. I've clarified with Democratic Services that there are no issues with my participation in this decision making, that it's entirely appropriate, and confirmed that I'm capable of viewing both applications with an open mind. So just taking that for the record, Chairman.
Oh. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to look at Nicole. You okay with that? Yep, that's fine. So that's good. Thank you very much for that. No other declarations I can see. Okay, we can then move on to agenda item 3, which is to receive and agree the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 9th of March. Can I take those as agreed? Agreed, thank you. We can note those, Anisha. Agenda item 4 is to matters notified in advance or urgent, which we have none this evening. And agenda item 5 is to confirm the public and private parts of the meeting. I can confirm to members here this evening, or members of the public here this evening, and those watching, that all items are in part 1, which is the public part of the process. There are no part 2 or private items. Items 6, 7, 8 and 9 will be taken in that order this evening, and there are no petition items. Okay, that's Chairman's announcements and the agenda up to agenda item 6 taken care of, which now brings us to agenda item 6, which we can move into the main purpose of why we're here this evening. So we're now going to be discussing the land at Austin Road in Hayes, and I think at that point I can hand over to Mandip to take us through the application.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Agenda item number 6 is land at Austin Road in Hayes, and committee report starts on page 5. There is an addendum for this item. Now, I apologise for its length, but it is making simple corrections and clarifications. Some of the first items relate to ensuring that the application can get on site as soon as possible, and there is nothing fundamental, well, that's my opinion, but if you wish to ask for clarification on any of the addendum items, please do so. There is a new condition at the end, and that proposes detail or further information about the interim or temporary children's play area that's proposed as part of this application. I do also have a verbal update. You will note that the TfL consultee or the sum for the Healthy Streets contribution, as per the recommendation in the report on page 10, the request had not been confirmed as yet by TfL. Now, we have had confirmation from TfL that the sum that they are requesting is not £335 as they had initially put forward a few months ago. It is £144,400 towards Ballsbridge. So that's come about as a result of them taking account of the net uplift in movements. So therefore, the sum has been reduced to reflect the fact that there are existing movements on site. That has been agreed, so I would like that minuted as a verbal update, but that is the only verbal update for this item. Bless you. If we turn to the application site, the application site is outlined in red. It's a significant parcel of land which comprises of the existing Austin Road estate, which comprises 260 homes in total and a community facility building. So if I orientate you, this is Pump Lane running east to west. We have the canal running along the southern boundary of the site. This is the main Hayes Town Centre High Street, which has recently been opened up after being pedestrianised for some time. And then Crown Close runs alongside one of the elevations, or boundaries, sorry. If I take you to the planning application site, constraints plan, so we can identify the town centre boundary, or the main primary shopping area here. We also have the Chaley Industrial Estate, which I think most will remember from previous planning committees, that was approved a few years ago now, which is on site. We do have some photos of that. And the application site is, again, centrally located with the canal to the south. We do have a couple of locally listed and listed buildings on the site that I might point out now. So this is the listed public house on the corner. Apologies, I know I'll do it this way. This is listed property on the corner, which is on the high street and along the canal. I've got a photograph of that a little bit later on. And this is a locally listed building at the application site. Now, this is Benlow Works, which I believe most members are aware of. It's a site allocation within the local plan, but it is some distance from the application site. But it is worth noting that that is also the other listed building. This area shaded in yellow is the strategic industrial land of Silverdale Road. So the application site does not fall within that employment area. If we take you through the application, so the application proposes demolition of all buildings in phases, but is a hybrid planning application. So just to clarify, hybrid means that it's partly in outline and partly in full. So this development block to the north, fronting Pump Lane and Crown Close, is the only area that is seeking full planning permission. All of the remainder of the site, so that comprises of these areas here, are in outline only. So we have agreed the parameters, so maximum heights, land uses, maximum building extents have been agreed, but all other details will come through via reserve matters, and these will be presented to planning committee as and when they are drawn up. For information, these are flatted blocks in these areas here, so there are 3 of them in the outline phases, and then running alongside the boundary here, I'm not sure if it's very easy to see, but they are actually going to be houses, so they will be traditional 3-storey form properties. Now, Austin Road currently runs along the land which is currently taken up, which is proposed to be taken up by these houses. So Austin Road itself will be realigned and moved maybe 2 metres to the left, which is probably the crudest way I can put it. Alan could probably give you the dimensions later, but it's being moved and realigned to redesign the feel of the estate. The parameter plan 1 sets out the land uses. So I mentioned earlier that there is an existing community centre on site. That is being re-provided in the phase just at the bottom of the site. And all of this green shading, I'm not sure if we can all see it as clearly as I can, but this is the public open space that's being provided on site. And again, the full block is up to the north. We have development zones, so the outer limits of each building phase and the inner limits. The central area denotes the area that we are likely, it's not confirmed yet, to secure as podium deck amenity and communal space for the residents. We have building height maximum, so you can see the variations throughout the site with a more traditional form along this area to provide some relief to Little Road before we get to approximately 8 stories in height in these areas. Now, access and movement, this sets out the strategy. The existing estate does not have a lot of permeability. We were on site there last week, and it was evident to see that there is not a lot of movement between the application site at Austin Road and onto Crown Close. I think there is one walkway approximately located here, but again, that isn't very well signposted either. The proposal seeks to deliver new blocks which have new roads located between them, so to provide a sense of a more traditional street layout, and that is to respond to some of the antisocial behaviour issues. There are a lot of problems with the existing Austin Road estate, which are discussed briefly in the committee report. Now, we are fully supported by Secure by Design, who have fundamental concerns about the layout and the way in which the current estate is impermeable, and therefore the proposals have been worked up alongside the Secure by Design officer, who is supportive. We have a hard and soft landscape plan, so I mentioned earlier that we have a central public open space proposed. These are the internal communal amenity decks, which would be for proposed residents only, but we are also seeking to provide some betterment. So the canal at the moment, I have some images of it a little later on, is used for car parking at an upper level, so that will be stopped up formally, and the area will be for pedestrians and cyclists only. So we are proposing that there will be an enhancement to the public realm along the canal. Those details will come through by the reserve matters and in consultation with the Canals and River Trust. If we turn to the full planning application, which is the one that has the most detail, we have a fairly typical layout of a podium block. Pump Lane has been through a couple of design changes in order to make sure that the frontage onto Pump Lane is as active as possible. Now, it's quite difficult to see on plan form, but we have negotiated where there were otherwise going to be blank frontages just here to now be glazed frontages to provide some interaction at street level with those passers-by on Pump Lane, which is a fairly busy road. We have the main entrance into the block on the street frontage at Pump Lane, so we have a lobby entrance to give that activity. We also have front doors on the streets, which along all elevations, in order to provide, again, more activity. There is a small area of podium parking, or undercroft parking, sorry, with a podium above in the centre of the site. Before I forget, the addendum cites a new condition about temporary play area. Now, the temporary play area will be proposed in this area here. There are indicative plans for it, and that will be provided during the 8-year build period. So because of the length of the build period, having a temporary play facility is better than having none. There is one that exists on site already. However, it's so far down to the south, it's an improvement to have some play provided in phase 1 that will then cater for phases 2, 3, 4 and 5. We have a first floor plan, so as I mentioned, there is an internal podium communal area for all residents. There is screening proposed in these areas to ensure that there is adequate privacy. We have a number of dual aspect units, primarily on the corners. Each unit will also have its own balcony. We have a second floor plan. One of the other changes that we negotiated through the course of the application is to increase some of these units to use the flat roof areas for additional amenity. Now, all of them have been set in from the boundaries, which is always a concern for us. So that is also providing additional amenity space for those future residents. The form goes up the building, so we've got the third floor plan, the fourth floor plan, the fifth floor, and at sixth floor level you'll see where the building reduces in its mass. So the bulk of the height rises in one corner only, and then we have a seventh and an eighth floor, or rather the roof plan of the application site. So this area here is the central area that's marginally taller, or 2 stories taller than the remainder of the application site. We have the elevations for Austin Road, which will be the newly aligned Austin Road. So you'll see that there is punctuation in the building form, and that's to provide adequate daylight or illumination to the amenity area within the centre of the site. we've called them connecting streets. So we've talked about there being new streets created within the application site. So this is the elevation that looks onto what will be the future street that links Austin Road and Crown Close. We also have the Crown Close elevation, so you'll see the slightly taller element on the corner, which is the junction of Crown Close and Pump Lane. This is the Pump Lane elevation. Again, it's not very easy to see, but there have been enhancements to this ground floor elevation in order to ensure that there's adequate visibility and activity at ground floor level. We have proposed sections of the building. We'll take you to some photographs. So this is the Little Road and Pump Lane junction of the application site. So you can see Silverdale Road estate, so the application site within the distance, and also the tallest element of the existing Austin Road estate, which is Skeffington Tower, which is approximately 15 stories. I apologise, I will have a look into that. We have the Chaley Industrial Estate. So this is the development that we granted permission for a few years ago. Now these photos are, if you were down on site with us on Friday, you will know that this development has moved on significantly. It doesn't really look like that anymore. It's actually almost finished along the road frontage. So that's the Chaley Industrial Estate redevelopment. We have Pump Lane looking west. So we have an existing car park directly, slightly askew from the application site, and this is a existing hotel development. This is the view from Silverdale Road. So you'll notice in the report that we do talk about long, short, and mid-range views. It is important to note that the existing building is of a significant scale, so it doesn't apologise for its size, and it is visible from from a lot of viewpoints. So it is an existing tall building. We have the view from Chalfont Road looking towards the application site. So just in case you can't make it out, this is the application site in the far distance. This is Austin Road. And then Austin Road looking back towards Pump Lane, so that's the hotel that I referenced a little while ago. This is the back wall of the Little Road properties. This is the location of where those new dwelling houses would be located. And then Austin Road would move slightly further into the application site here. We have an image of the centre of the site, Austin Road, and this is the locally listed building I referenced much earlier on this evening. This is a view from the canal. So the top image shows us on the canal. So the canal towpath is just down here, and we have this slightly elevated section which is known as Western View. This is the area which is currently used for car parking, which will be stopped up. No vehicles will be able to travel in this section, and this will be a new pedestrian and cycle walkway. Standing in the same spot but looking back towards the site, so back towards Pump Lane in the distance, these are the level changes. So there is some work to do in how we get the most out of a redevelopment in order to make sure that there are less level changes and a little bit more safety in this area. This is the view from the towpath. So this is, for clarity, this is the application site, and these are those vehicles that we were just looking at in the last photograph. This is the listed public house. Sorry about the quality of this image. And so that's on the high street, and the application site is in the distance, and that's the tallest element of the development site. We have a view from High Point Village. So this is the development next door to the train station. So when you're looking back onto the site over the canal, and there is the application site. And this is Crown Close. So Crown Close, its only neighbours are really the rear of the existing high street, so the servicing and delivery yards, and also the car park entrances which serve the high street. However, Crown Close will itself be improved. There is an element of car parking along Crown Close, which is pay and display parking. Now, the application will propose to re-provide the majority of those pay and display parking spaces, but some will be lost. But we are hoping to accommodate as many as we can. This is the view looking east along Pump Lane, so this would be the corner of the new application site. We have a few images. Obviously, we always like to say that have our health warning that these are just images that have been prepared, but we thought it would be useful. So this is phase 1, so the new block that's proposed on the corner of Pump Lane and the new Austin, or the realigned Austin Road. This is a view of the other side of that same building. Then we have the central area from Austin Road looking towards the community space, which is just down here, and in the distance you'll see the taller elements of the proposal along the canal. We have this, which is the proposed, we've talked a lot about the new streets that are being created, so this is an image of what the new street will look like. So this is the full planning submission that we have, and this block is actually an outline, so it's an indication of what will be on the other side. And this is the new community square, which is one of the public open spaces proposed within the application site. It also offers a direct public thoroughfare route from all of the residential properties through the application site and up to the high street. So that's a route that exists at the moment but is not overly legible, and some might argue it's actually not overly safe either. So it's introducing this new road between the application site, or within the application site, to the high street is a significant enhancement. At ground floor level, it won't be overly visible at the moment, but there is proposed to be that community space we provided in this location here. So it will directly sit into the public square. Apologies. So the application tonight is recommended for approval. I won't try and bombard you with too many facts and figures. You can ask the questions later, but we do have an existing 260 homes on site, of which 199 are existing affordable homes. Now, the proposed development will re-provide 239 affordable homes, so that's an uplift of 40 residential units, which will be affordable housing. The total development will comprise of 500 units, so the remainder will comprise private housing. Now, we are able to advise that as of the negotiations which are set out in the committee report, there is 53.8% affordable housing, and that's considered to be the maximum viable that could be delivered. It has been through much scrutiny by the planning team and the council's planning consultants for viability, and that is deemed to be the maximum reasonable. Alongside that, it's also worth noting that whilst it's the maximum reasonable, we do also have a suite of planning obligations as set out on page 9 to 11, which the application is also delivering to mitigate against the development proposals and any harm. I won't labour on the crime issues of the existing estate, but there are significant concerns, and the proposals are supported by the crime prevention officer, who has also been involved in pre-op advice in looking at the design and making it as safe as possible. We have a deficit of private amenity space, so it is a minor policy conflict within the application. However, the development is also providing a significant amount of play space on site and the public open space. So on balance, it's considered that it's only a minor policy conflict. There is significant enhancements proposed there are proposed to be significant enhancements along the canal, and some of those have been set out in the images and on the plans, but they will come through in more detail when we get the reserve matters application for that phase. The level of car parking secured at the site is 0.23 spaces per unit. Now, that is I won't put words into Alan's mouth, but probably higher than we would have wanted in a town centre location. However, the proposed level of parking is very much driven by the right to return. The existing residents have circa more than 200 car parking spaces on site, and there is a right to return for those residents who have an existing parking space to be given the option of a space on site. So that is what has driven the fairly high car parking ratio in this town centre location. Overall, the scheme delivers significant benefits, and subject to the Section 106 agreement, conditions and the Stage 2 mayoral referral, the addendum report and my verbal update, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think we've got new microphones. Thank you for that, Mandip. Before we go over to members to debate what we've just heard, a lot of what we've just heard, well, there's been a lot of information there to take on board. I'm going to invite James Rogers just to give us an update from his perspective.
Yeah. So I do have one final bit of housekeeping. Sorry, the microphones are echoing a bit. Items 6, 7 and 8 on tonight's agenda all have slightly different worded heads of terms and parking permits. Now, there is some differences, obviously, between items 6, 7 and 8, but that does not fully explain some of the difference in wording of the proposed heads of terms. and item 8 in particular on Keith House has 3 different heads of terms related to parking permits. So members will be aware of the complexities of parking permits heads of terms, and whether they include council car parks, for instance, has in the past been something officers have requested delegated authority to agree final wording. So the reason I'm mentioning all this is for transparency purposes. I wanted to state that for items 6, 7 and 8, I would like to do further work post-committee on the final wording of the parking permits heads of terms with the council's legal officer. So it's just to sort of clarify the delegated authorities I'm seeking this evening. So just a sort of final concluding comment, as highlighted by Mandate, this scheme delivers significant benefits, particularly the delivery of high quality affordable homes, new public spaces and a layout that will create a safe and welcoming environment. The many positive benefits of the proposals weigh heavily in favour of an approval recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for that, James. We've adjusted the volume. I'm just hoping people at home can still hear us. Can everybody else hear what we're saying? Yeah, okay, cool. So, we've had an extensive presentation. We've just heard from James, his 2 penneth there. Draw members' attention to the addendum, which is also got in front of us. So, we've got no ward councillors, we've got no petitioners, we've got no applicants speaking on this. We can go straight to the debate. Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Chairman. Just got a few questions. Firstly, when I see a report that has will give delegated powers to the Director of Planning, I don't have any issues with that in itself, but there are quite a lot here. And it's just mindful, I've been doing this long enough that we tend to fall in some traps sometimes where we agree with these things and then it comes back to us and something's changed or something and we can't debate it because we've made a decision now. So my first question would be to officers to make sure that there is, if things do come back, then we have the right to change certain issues on them. Okay, especially when there's just so many recommendations here that it just does concern me. So officers can answer that as well. But let me just get rid of everything that I've got in front of me. So that's the first point. The second point is that we're taking the community facility out. We have a temporary play area. Are we having some help with this what this community centre is used at the moment for? And their displacement's not costing them extra, so make sure of that. I see there's grey water issues here, which is fantastic, like to see it. No solar panels anywhere, which I would like to see. And lastly, to make sure that all lighting is LED from going forward on the site anyway. And the last thing I wanted to know was how many parking spaces we actually lose on. I was going to call it Charlie Austin Road, but I call it Austin Road. Crown Close, is it? Right, there you go. That's all I've got. Apart from that, I think really good for the area. I like the layout, and it's very open and reduces crime when you have open spaces like that, and open roads as well. So, and make sure the lighting on those roads is adequate, especially in that area. Apart from that, if officers can come back to me on those questions, please.
Okay, if I could just paraphrase what you came up with there. So obviously you wanted to just get officers' opinion on the amount of delegated issues, what's happening to the community centre displacement, solar panels was another area you wanted to cover off, LED lighting, and I guess you wanted to probably throw an auto switch in with that, and loss of parking on Crown Close. So is there anything you want to pick up before we go to Mandate, James?
Yeah, I think we'll probably do half and half here, if that's okay. So I'll do 2 of them. So firstly, on the delegated authority, we're not doing anything sort of out of the ordinary here. So in effect, we've set out, I think, quite clearly all the different heads of terms, and Mandate's clarified that. So there was 2 since we published the report that we've been looking at in terms of the final wording. The healthy streets, we now know the final sums. So a lot of these heads of terms, they're very specific. So the community space, you've got 120 to 140. So it's a very specific head of terms. So what that means in practice is post-committee, I don't have delegated authority to agree 110 square metres. You're going to get 120 to 140 because that's the delegation effectively I've been given. And so the only head of term that I know from speaking to our legal officer we may want to tweak is the parking permits, and that's simply because there's some history to this, members will be aware of, that they cause us they get particularly complicated, shall I say, and we have to make sure we've covered the blue badges, the council car parks and the different aspects of it. So that's part A of the scheme of delegation, and then the only difference from some other majors is that it's GLA referable. So what we have to do is we have to ask delegated authority if the mayor adds anything. Effectively, officers are asking that I've delegated authority to do those changes. So quite often the mayor doesn't alter our reports. On West London Film Studios, there was an additional head of term the mayor asked for on drainage, but it was an addition, and put simply, I don't think it was anything anybody would remotely have disagreed with. It was actually strengthening in effect, the approval that was moving forward. So in practice, what you see is what you get, almost, to put it in very sort of simple layman's terms. I mean, for this particular scheme, as Mandit's sort of explained in detail, there is a full aspect and there's an outline aspect. So the outline, reserve matters will come back and members will scrutinise in detail, I am sure, the design of the subsequent blocks. I can help on one of the points you raised, Councillor Higgins, though. So we have in our landscaping condition, we split it into different bits, such as cycle storage, hard landscaping. We do have external lighting. We could add, which should be energy efficient, or some form of wording to the, because I don't see, I'm absolutely positive we'd expect the external lighting to be energy efficient. So I see no reason on condition 19, and this could equally apply to the next item, because that we can't sort of strengthen that, because I'm sure that's what we'd wish for.
I think before we pick up any of the other points you raised, it'd be good to just get your feedback on what you've just heard. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy with officers dealing with this in front of me. That's not really where I'm really driving this. What I'm driving is that I can probably bet my mortgage on that this developer will come back and ask for something more. Okay, and what I want to make sure that we are not going to we've done it before in the past, we've tied our hands up that we can't make changes or control it the way that we can control, because it's in principle, and I know that reserve matters will come back, but if there's reserve matters and they want to put an extra story on it or something like that, then we get, oh well, we have approved this, we can only do X. I want to be able to say no, we've agreed that, and we really want to examine what we're examining is this application and not something that's a pie in the sky, because it all looks very good, but I don't know the financial implications. I'm not even going to get to it, but that's where I'm going with this.
So there's actually a far easier way for me to answer your question, sorry, having thought about it. So often when we deal with outlines, we don't have some of the conditions that we've got on this proposal. So if you look at condition 5, for instance, we're very specific on the quantums. So there are a number of conditions, and I know Mandit kind of knows each of the conditions slightly better than I, relating to height, to density. So I think the comfort I could give is that this report has conditions that you may not have seen on other reports, and that I think I can give you the comfort that we got the conditions on this report that may address, I think, your concerns. Yeah.
Thank you through you, Chairman.
Okay, there was a couple other points about the interim displacement of the community centre. We've covered off lighting now, but solar panels and loss of parking in Crown Close.
The new community facility is in what is indicatively phase 4. Now, it will not go until such time as phase 4 is on the ground, and therefore there will probably be an interim arrangement for a short period when there is no community facility. Now, the other question that was asked is, what is it used for? So I am aware that it's used for homework club, sewing club, and it currently is the regeneration hub, so where people go if they have any questions about the current regeneration proposals across the estate. So it is well used. I've been advised that they are looking to move to some digital inclusion workshops, so some of them might move online for an interim period, but for the most phase they're hoping that there will be a permanent structure re-provided. We could add a condition to ensure that there is no loss of the community use. That isn't something that's in there at the moment, so we ensure that even if it's for a short period, there is a temporary facility or an alternative provided. So I will pick that up as a new condition. Now, page 120 sets out that PVs will be proposed. I just don't have the PV plan on the slides that we have on the screen, but there are PVs proposed. And there is actually no carbon offset for phase 1 because it is delivering everything on site, which is, yes, exactly. LED lights, James has picked up, so we will be amending condition 19 to F. And on page 111, we do cite the number of spaces on Crown Close. It currently has 18, and the future proposals will reduce that down to 12. So we will lose 6 pay and display bays along Crown Close. Sorry, did you have anything?
Sorry, yeah, through you, Chairman. Is there any way we can replace those 6 somewhere else on site?
Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. As part of the redevelopment of the site, the local road network changes, and basically that means that there will be less car parking spaces provided. Currently, the development has 223 car parking spaces. With the new proposal, the development would have 84. So, comparing like for like, what the houses that are there now and the houses that are there when it's developed, there would be a loss of 139 car parking spaces. And some of the car parking spaces would also be lost on street. Currently, residents have 110 on-street parking permits. When the development, if the development is built, that would fall to 29. So, as part of the development, the number of on-street car parking spaces will fall. And as Mandip said, there would be a loss of pay and display spaces on Crown Close from 18 down to 12.
So that's a loss of 6 pay and display.
Yeah.
Pay and display places on Crown Close. Yeah. Do we come back, Councillor Higgins?
Thank you, Chairman. So obviously, with that, there is nowhere for us to, because I know parking is a stressful area that I know very well. So that if there's no opportunity for us to regain those spaces on any other area. Okay, well, what I'm going to do anyway, because I'll do it now. Sorry.
No problem, and I think
I'll propose it anyway.
Okay, you're moving. I think Nicole wants to come in on one of the conditions that was suggested.
Apologies. I just wanted to come back in relation to the community centre. Rather than it being a condition, I think it might be more useful if it forms part of the head of term, because I can draft that in so that it all flows and it's in one place rather than in conditions and heads of term.
Okay, thank you for that, Nicole. And thank you, Councillor Higgins, for your list. We'll go over to Councillor Cawthorne now, who indicated next.
Thank you, Chairman. Couple of questions and an observation. I'll perhaps add a few more words later on. But 2 things really. The waste storage bit, I did raise this at the last meeting, and I think this applies to both this item and the next one, really. I note the condition in the addendum that's come out regarding that. It's just something that I'm particularly focused on, and certainly have been for a long time. We know there are challenges around food waste recycling in blocks. I know there have been all manner of trials to develop good practice, and I'm just keen that on a development of this magnitude, these don't come along every day. We take every opportunity to maximise the opportunity to sort of showcase good practice, if you like. So I just want that to be as strong as it can be. How much more we can say than what's already here, I don't know, but I would like to make the point and ask the question.
I think I can help. I don't think there's much more we can do in terms of the condition wording, because it's asking for the food waste and refuse strategy. But if we wanted to add an extra, an informative that's basically spelling out that this is important to the council and the local planning authority, that as part of the discharge of conditions that it's properly dealt with, then that might help, because you can use informatives to emphasise that there's a particular condition that is important in terms of ensuring that the details are right. And that might also enable us to, without having to go into lots of detail in the wording of a condition, to put in any particular comments regarding best practice from our colleagues in waste services.
I'm happy with that if colleagues are. Fair enough. Can I move on a couple of other quick points? Or
Yeah, no, if you have a couple of points there, the floor is yours.
The second relates to the health contribution. Page 68 sort of talks about that. Acutely aware from long experience of the challenges associated with health spend that coming out of development. And again, this is a significant development. It really is. And I'm just anxious that I suppose to understand how the health contribution works in the context of a hybrid application of this nature, with phased development occurring over quite a significant period of time. Recognising pressures on existing GP practices in many locations in the south of the borough, I'm just keen that we do whatever we can and express our will for what it's worth, to make sure that it works as well as it can on the ground, really. So I suppose it's an observation and a question, to the extent we can get comfort on that point. And then the last thing for me is just around the housing split on page 95. There is reference in the report to the fact that the housing need is perhaps greater for larger units, but actually at this location we really can only go with this sort of split, given PTAL ratings, given its town centre location, etc. So it's not a showstopper for me, but I suppose there's a tinge of regret in observing that at this point, that's all. I may want to say a bit more later if I may, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. I think 2 points you raised there is how does the health contribution work in sync with the phasing, and just officers' views on the housing split, I think. Thank you.
Very good question about the health contribution. So the majority of the contribution towards health is captured through the community infrastructure levy, so through the CIL sum that we gain. However, affordable housing is not liable to CIL. And for that reason, what we have actually done is capture the uplift in affordable housing's health contribution, so those 40 additional units, and that's the money that we will put into the health pot to be spent on improvements to existing facilities or new facilities. It's not a lot of money, but we have to be fair and reasonable that there are already 260 residents who have an eligibility to or feed into the existing health service, so we're only looking at charging for the uplift, and we do get phased payments. So one of the informatives talks about the way in which CIL monies are delivered, and it's done via each phase. So the sum that's been calculated is for the whole development, so the full and the outline phase. So that was the health contribution. Was there any questions on that?
No.
With unit mix, yes, you're right in that it is regrettable that we can't secure more family housing. However, this is a town centre location, and in town centre locations, the London plan and even our own plan are do advocate that there is a need to cater for 1 and 2 bed units. So on this development scheme, whilst it's disappointing, it's not a policy conflict per se. And we are also, to some extent, governed by the right to return. So there is a proportion that must be catered for, and the remainder is in effect cross-subsidising the redevelopment. Thank you.
It's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Right, Councillor Duncan, you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me what the current breakdown of housing is, of affordable housing, council housing or whatever?
Yes. So at the moment there are 181 social rented units on the estate, and there are...
And what size are they?
I have a mix of 1, 2 and 3. Hold on. So for the social rented, this is the master plan proposed. I would need to go and search that, but I know that there are 199, and that will increase to 239. And do you want me to... I will try and find the detailed mix of the existing block.
They're increasing to 239. That's because there's 40
additional
units,
affordable
and they're
units.
London affordable rent.
They are.
Yeah. So is that less rent?
No.
More?
The same.
Why do we distinguish between them if they're the same?
So no, the social rent is fully re-provided. And then the uplift is the London affordable rent.
Yeah, but the rent that people pay, the assessment of that rent is the same. Is that what you're saying? That's what I'm asking. Is it more expensive to live in one or the other type of housing?
I think from dealing with this application, what you're dealing with is an uplift of London affordable rented. And as far as I'm aware, there is no London affordable rented on the site currently. It's all social rented. So you're going to have a reprovision of the social rented, and then the London affordable rented is new. So that will be open to new tenants, and they will be provided with London affordable rented, which is rent set by the GLA. So it's not going to be more expensive for existing residents because they won't step into those units.
I understand the way it's going to be allocated. I just wanted to know if there was a difference in the rents, and I also want to know if this 199 that we have at the moment, socially rented, 50% of that is 3-bedroom housing, which is going to be replaced by 50% 2-bedroom housing. I want to understand the balance of this, because it's all being condensed into 2 blocks, which is sort of 1 unit of development at the north of the site, and then the rest of it is going to be private development, isn't it? I'm just trying to explore. Are we going to end up with less units?
So I can clarify that there is no loss of affordable floor space. So the GLA policy actually requires the re-provision by floor area. So it will not result in the loss of floor space, which is affordable. So I think that's your concern, although I don't have the breakdown of the unit mix to hand. The unit mix would reflect that there is unlikely to be a loss of the 3 beds.
It's really picking up on Councillor Cawthorne's point, which I too had concerns about, that the greatest demand we have is for large units, for 3 and 4 bed units. I mean, we've got 1 and 2 bedroom units everywhere, and we really need larger family units. We're having people living in appalling, overcrowded accommodation, and really very unsuitable accommodation, sometimes with families in suffering quite a lot of stress, and the children suffering illness through that. That's something that we are very mindful of in these, and that's why I want to understand that, and it seems that that has not been a consideration in this. It's, I understand that you followed the policies which say we look at the floor space, but I mean, you could have floor space just providing a load more units, which were one-bed units, for example. Well, that's not what we want. It's got to be something that more closely addresses the identified need in Hillingdon, and I don't think this does that. I think that more larger units are needed. But if the information isn't readily available, I appreciate that difficulty. Another point I wanted to ask about was the health services, and if there's going to be 240 units and they're going to be up to 500 provided altogether, that means that the private units that are now going to be provided on the rest of the site are going to be something in the order of about 260. And I find it incredible that although we've got existing provision for existing people who are 240, if you like, well, there's a small uplift there. There's going to be such a small amount put through for health, which doesn't seem to, a financial contribution of 49,820 for another 200 and odd people, 260 people or whatever. That just doesn't seem, it sounds like we're, being scammed or, shortchanged in some way at all. I mean, honestly, would you be able to provide health for an additional 260 people with £49,000? Because if anybody can, please let them come and explain to me how that can be done. I just don't see that is, either the policy is at fault or there's something going on here which I need to understand better in order to be happy with this. I'm not happy with that. The other thing is the car club details. Can I just understand that? I understand that they do work quite well. That's on page 10, item 15. On-site car club of up to 4 spaces, free membership for 3 years, and £50 credit for one person per unit. So, one person per unit, so only one person would be able to. So, what happens if there's someone who's not well and their partner can't access the car club? I mean, that's because they need to take them to a hospital appointment or something. That just seems to me, get up off your sick bed and get in this car and drive yourself to hospital. Can we modify that, or am I misunderstanding this?
Okay, try and just paraphrase what we've been presented with here. So, I think you've already said about the housing numbers. Haven't got those to hand, so you'll pick those up. The health service contribution, I think the question is, how's that calculated?
Yes.
On the basis, and as a concern around the car club head of term,
yeah.
which I think is from what I can read is fairly standard, but it'd be good to understand how that works. So.
Thanks. I've got another couple
okay.
as well. Also, the disabled parking provision. I would like that to be, as large as possible. And I didn't really see much disabled parking provision for this number of people. And particularly if there's going to be a re-provision of existing tenants, some of whom will be older people who will need that. I think the reduction in parking spaces, I think will disadvantage people, make it very difficult for some people and for some families. If you've got a family, very often you need a car, and particularly if you're going to stock up a freezer, trying to go and do a monthly shop or even a weekly shop for some families. There's a lot of frozen stuff which needs to be got in a car and got home as quickly as possible. So I think the reduction in both on-street and off-street parking is, well, not welcome as far as I'm concerned. I'd also like to understand, I see that there's CCTV, and how has this been thought through with the police? Because at the moment, as you will know, there are a great many issues, particularly in Hayes Town Centre, with begging, with antisocial behaviour, with drug dealing, with all kinds of criminal activity. And if we're going to be dividing this up in this way, with roads coming through, which I welcome, to have a large open area like that, which opens things up and looks wonderful, we do need to have a lot of CCTV there. I mean, it's no good under providing CCTV, because you pay for it in other ways. You pay for it in raised costs dealing with criminal activity. And the last thing really is condition 25, which is about overheating. There's I think it's clause 3. It says manage the heat within the building through exposed internal thermal mass and high ceilings. What we need to do is to be more specific, if I could request. I don't know if it needs to be an additional line, but we need to control the heat in communal areas, because if it's within people's flats, they can turn the heating down, they can, open windows or whatever. But what was really a great difficulty with some developments, and one that we had particularly, I remember in West Drayton, is along all the corridors of the flats. When we had that heat wave, there were hot water pipes running along public areas, communal areas, which made it like an oven, and older people and people with vulnerable health had to be moved out. So could we put something in there, please, about there should be no heating elements that are uncontrolled like that within communal areas? Because all the other things, are good, and I welcome that. Thank you for that. But that's a particular thing that we do know about and have had experience and had to sort that out. Okay.
Do you want me to go through any of those points? You picked them up, yeah? Okay. But James might want to come in.
There's just a few points. So condition 39 does cover CCTV.
Yes, I saw that.
And I just wanted to stress on the crime prevention aspect. So what normally happens with a major planning application is we consult the crime prevention officer, and quite often they'll the main part of their comment will be requesting a secure by design condition. This is very different because the secure by design officer was engaged during pre-application advice. There's been much more input from the relevant officer, Rob Palin, into this particular proposal. He actually had input in the sort of, in effect, into the design of the proposals. So the secure by design officer, put simply, has been far more involved in the evolution of the first two items on this agenda than any other major applications I can think of that we've been dealing with for the past year or two.
Thank you for that. It's I do welcome that, and I'm sure that he would put in as many as he felt were needed. The difficulty has always been in saying the cost of monitoring those, because that's borne by the council, and there's sometimes been difficulties in saying we can monitor all of this effectively. So it's that cost, which is a cost that we take on, unless, there have to be contracts that are signed for other people to do that. And I don't know what direction things are moving in, but it's fine having CCTV as long as it is properly monitored, and it would be needed there as well. And the last thing I wanted to say was the thing that I'm always going on about, which is air quality. And I know that as I get older and these targets for electric vehicles and everything are reducing, and probably I may see this in my lifetime, but this is in an air quality focus area, haze focus area, where proposals are required to improve air quality within focus areas. Based on the information that we've got, it doesn't improve. And so that's a concern for me, particularly as we're putting so many properties here. They're going to be 500 instead of 200 and something. But as these targets for more electric vehicles come closer, I feel a bit more comforted by that, I suppose, than I have formerly. Thank you.
Duncan? Sorry, before we go over to Mandy,
I just think I should probably come back on the affordable housing. So I don't really want to sort of bamboozle committee with numbers too much, but I mean there is a net gain in affordable housing units, a net gain in affordable housing rooms, and a net gain in overall affordable housing floor space, which is an increase in thousands of square metres. So and obviously you've got the increase in the quality of units, which is almost the most important thing of all, because as members were noted during the site visit, unfortunately bits of the existing estate are falling apart, quite simply, and therefore there will be a brand new buildings built to completely modern, high quality standards, basically. So it's I'm not sure it's correct to say there's a loss of floor space, but that aside, there's an increase in the quality of the units. I think you need to take into account as well, in effect, because of the fact that this is a estate regen proposal.
Yeah.
Okay, so the existing estate, I can run through the existing figures. They comprise of 93 one-bed affordable housing units, 94 two-bed affordable housing units, and 12 three-bed affordable housing units. So that's a total of 199. The proposed development, illustratively, will deliver 72 3- and 4-bed units across the development site. So that's a significant increase against what exists at the moment. I would caveat that there are existing 3-bed market homes, but ultimately we want to secure as many of the family homes for the affordable housing. So there is an uplift. So hopefully that addresses the unit mix point. So the majority on site are actually 1- and 2-bed, and this scheme will do more.
Thank you. That really is helpful. Thank you.
Now the car club. The car club is the free membership and the free credit to use the car club is eligible for one person in each household. However, anyone can join. So if you had 3 persons within the unit who wanted to join the car club, they can join, but there is obviously the joining fee that they would have to pay. So I think it would be overly onerous for us to ask for 3 memberships per household, but I think this is a positive offer to influence and encourage people to use the car club. And we actually have up to 5 car club spaces. That was one of the addendum items. So it's moved from 4 to 5. The health centre. Now, the reason the sum is so small is because health obligations and contributions are secured through SIL for private housing. The sum that we're securing under the report is simply for the 40 additional affordable housing units. So we are not being fiddled, I promise. We are getting our health contribution for the uplifted 260 private homes through the SIL monies that we will receive.
So will this be at the detailed stage then, that we would get more?
We would get it phase by phase.
Right, okay, thank you.
Disabled parking provision, I will hand over to Alan. On the CCTV point, now we are proposing to adopt Austin Road and all of the new roads. So they will then fall within the parking management area of the existing site, and then I assume, by virtue of it being adopted highway, they will employ the same CCTV infrastructure, and it would connect to the same or the existing arrangements. Condition 25, I've picked it up, and it would be fine to add that point. I think it would be assessed separately, because I think the assessment is usually taken apartment by apartment, which is possibly one of the failings of the problems that you found at the West Drayton site. Air quality. Now, the sum, you're correct, is low, and we are looking for air quality improvements, and the air quality improvements are actually being delivered on site by virtue of less on-site car parking and improvements in other ways. So it might not be an answer that you want. We do have pollution-absorbing trees, but technically this is an improvement upon the air quality environment over the existing arrangements. So I've left disabled parking to Alan.
Thank you, Chairman. Phase 1, 80 homes. There'll be 23 car parking spaces, of which 2 would be blue badge, and that's give or take 10%, which is in accordance with the London Plan standard. Phase 2, there would be 420 homes, 90 car parking spaces, and 11 blue badge spaces. So again, that's just over 10%, which again is in accordance with the London Plan standards. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Just going through the... Yeah. Councillor Duncan, do you want to come back on?
No, thank you for the information to all the officers. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Right, I've got a few other councillors who wish to indicate. So I've got Councillor Higgins, Councillor Cawthorne and Councillor Mathers in that order, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's lovely to see Councillor Duncan's passion for planning, and it'd be sadly missed when you decided to retire. I'm picking up on one of your points. It's like for like, isn't it? So if we're replacing people that have been dispersed, will come back and they have the right for like. Is that correct? Yeah. So the right to return is that if they have a 3-bedroom, they'll be given a 3-bedroom. Is that correct? So I think that was really what you were getting to, but we went around the house a bit. But that's what I wanted to say. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. I've got Councillor Cawthorne next.
Yeah, I did say I'd come back. Just one or two things I want to say in addition to what I've said. Please note the increase in the larger units. That's helpful information. I mean, and I do sympathise with Councillor Duncan's point, but I would draw her attention to the information on page 58, where it says that we're very much in the hands of London Plan Policy H10 in terms of the mix, that we need to secure a suitable mix in line with that. And as she knows better than I do, I'm sure, that we don't have a completely free hand to act. We're always operating within policy parameters set by those outside Hillingdon, I'm afraid. But I think that this is something that's been overwhelmingly supported in the ballot which took place, and I was very pleased to see that. And I think this is a real positive. This is an area that I've known for many, many years. It's feeling its age, let's be frank about it. We saw that again the other day when we were there. And it's great that we've worked so hard to take people with us with some meaningful engagement right from the outset, and the whole decanting process, which is a huge challenge organisationally, has been, we've really risen to the task and made that work very well. So I'm delighted with that, and I would commend everyone associated with that piece of work, because it's very significant to this. And I think, there are some huge policy improvements in what's coming before us. I'm delighted with the improved access from the canal. There are issues there that we've seen with rush sleepers in the past. I think this will open it up and make it work a lot better. And I think this has a great deal to commend it. So I think it's been moved already, but I do support the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Was that seconding, Councillor Cawthorne?
If you need me to, I'll happily do so.
Yeah, and I think on the point that you raised there about community engagement, I mean, for those of us who were at the site visit on Friday, we were actually in the centre where they've got all of the display boards, and we actually witnessed residents in there as well, doing whatever they're doing in terms of their consultation. So that was good to see. Okay, Councillor Mathers.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to just ask about the electric vehicle points. So if there's any specification on the wattage. So, for example, some developers may want to put in 3.5 wattage ones, whereas the 7 wattage, I think I've got that right, rather than lamps, so I always get the two round the wrong way, is better because people can charge overnight rather than taking all day and all night. So if they're on economy 7, the vehicles can be charged more cheaply. and the proportion of vehicles in this part of this phase is 4 of 100, and that seems quite low. I know that this is, if I believe so, it's the higher proportion of social rented housing, but I wouldn't want that to discriminate those who wanted to have electric vehicles, and they're all within the building, and it would be useful to know what would be on the outskirts or on the open plan parts. And my second question is around, I just would like a little bit more explanation on solar panel provision, because I didn't really understand the answer. Thank you.
Okay, I think the first point, Alan, you want to pick up about the charging capability, and I think we have talked about this before in other developments, but it's useful to sort of like just get an understanding and see whether we need to add anything in to just sort of make it so it's overnight, because I think that was a point that was made. If you've got a regular three-prong plug, it can take you like 3 days to charge it, you know. So Alan, can you pick up the capability of charging?
Thank you, Chairman. For any development, when they come forward with we ask for electric vehicle charging points, and the type of electric vehicle charging point we would accept as a minimum would be 3 kilowatts per hour to 22 kilowatts per hour. And then your question with regards to where would the electric vehicle charging points be, they would all be on plot. We're not yet at the stage where we're able to start providing them on street, but we're working towards it. But these would be on plot. Thank you, Chairman.
You okay with that, Councillor Member?
Yes, just, I mean, I would ask if we're able to have a condition that it was higher than the 3.5 in terms of kilowatt per hour, because that is lower, that's the lower range. From what I've seen in other developments that is available, it may cost more money to install, but in the long run it's more affordable for people to run, if that's possible. And it was just whether the proportion was right across the whole scheme to just have the 4 EV points in phase 1.
You want to come back on that, Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We will be sure that the services that are leading to the electric vehicle charging points have the capability to accept higher specification charging points in the future. Just as an aside, there'll always be a market for the lower specification electric vehicle charging points as the second-hand market in electric vehicles develops. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah. I think in some respects the higher the charging spec can actually be dearer on your bill, I think.
Chairman,
but did you want to come back on that, Alan?
Yeah, it's currently the more expensive cars are those that are able to charge more quickly. So we do feel that 3 to 22 kilowatts is suitable. But nevertheless, technology will move on, and the electric vehicle market will really change and accelerate. No new petrol diesel cars available for sale from 2030 onwards. So it really is moving quickly, and I'm quite sure it won't be very long before people come back and the specification of the electric vehicle charging points will be upgraded, because it's what people will want. But from the outset, we feel comfortable that 3 to 22 kilowatts is suitable.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chairman.
And the solar panels question, a little bit more insight into how that works.
So the point I made earlier is that I don't have a roof plan that shows the solar panels in situ, but there are significant areas of flat roofs, so that's why I moved on to this area of plan. So we've got the 6th floor, which is not proposed to have any of the apartments exiting out onto it. So it's the 6th floor and the ROOD plan, not the roof plan, that would also accommodate solar panels on the site. So there are the proposed energy saving on-site technology is solar panels, and they would be on these flat roofs, but I don't have the flat roof plan.
Does that give you what you wanted, Councillor? Yeah? Okay, right, I've got Councillor Yarrow who's indicating, and then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chairman. Having gone on the site visit on Friday and walked all the way around it, and one appreciates just what a state the existing site is actually in. And it really has gone well past its sell-by date. And I certainly support this application. Whoever's going to live there is going to live in a much better place than what they are living in now. It's certainly more open. The streets joining both sides together is certainly a new innovation to what there is. And when you're walking on the elevated walkway between the canal and Pump Lane, I mean, it is dangerous and almost falling apart. And as you look over the edge, you can see all the little areas and nooks and crannies where the police are extremely worried about the kind of antisocial behaviour that's going on. So I understand that the police are delighted with this, and they're very happy that they're going to be able to control what's going on there much better. So, Chairman, I support the application.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Yarrow. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, just a small point on the solar panels. In the report, it did say that there was some concern about having solar panels on the roof because pigeons could nest underneath these solar panels, and there was concern from, the airport, Heathrow, about birds, nesting and, being in close proximity to the airport and the risk and all the rest of it. So I wasn't quite sure what the outcome of that had been. Had there been further negotiations about that? It seemed to indicate in the report that there would be further talks about it.
I think we've got a condition on birds, but if you wanted to pick that up.
Condition 26, page 22. So there's the latest wording there in terms of bird hazard management plan, as it's called.
Yeah. But if that would mitigate against solar panels, then presumably we would need to investigate some other means of sustainable energy.
That wouldn't stop solar panels being installed. That condition simply requiring the developer to put measures in place that, in effect, try and prevent the proliferation of what's referred to as loafing birds.
I suppose they could net it, couldn't they? That wouldn't interfere. Yeah, I suppose they could. Yeah, thank you for that. I'm very encouraged by the fact that I think about 90% of residents responded and 79% of those positively. So it is something that residents want, and as Councillor Yarrow said, yes, it does need redeveloping.
Okay, right. As ever for this committee, some very good scrutiny and some really good questions. So thank you to everybody for that, and thank you to officers for answering them. I need to sort of pick the bones out of what we debated now and try and present it to everybody so we know what we're going to be voting on, given that we are moved and seconded. So the first point is delegated authority for heads of terms for parking. Yep, so that's delegated authority to James. We've also got an amended condition 25 for heating in the communal areas. I think we picked that one up. And please, if I have missed one, do shout, politely of course. We wanted to add a line into condition 19 which is around energy efficient lighting. And the other point that we've got here is an additional head of terms that covers off the loss of the community facility. Have I missed anything, team?
I have two.
Sorry, Councillor, let Mandate come through. I want an informative on waste management.
On food waste.
Yeah, so you get a condition and an informative. You've done well.
And the £144,000 from TfL towards Ballsbridge.
Correct. There was a verbal update that you gave at the very, very beginning. So, committee, that's what we are moved and seconded on. Can I take a show of hands for this application, please? All those in favour? So that is unanimous. So agenda item 6 this evening is unanimously approved. Thank you very much, everybody. As I said, some really good debates. While I turn the page now, eyes down for agenda item 7, which is the development at the land at Avondale Drive, Hayes. And over to you, Mandip.
Agenda item 7 is the area outlined in red on the screen. It comprises of the Avondale Drive estate. One thing to note is that this application site comprises of simply 3 residential blocks, 1, 2 and 3. The other areas that you can see on this site, this is a forecourt of existing garages which are on site, and these are 2, I'm going to refer to them as parking cages. We've got some photographs of them that I will show, and they're only a single-storey level of car parking to serve the residents. This area here is an existing playground. To orientate you, this large, almost rectangular shape is the playing fields that serve Minette School, and this is the tail end of Hitherbroom Park, which extends along here and follows through up to Cold Harbour Lane, I believe. This is Abbotswood Way, and Avondale Drive runs along the south of the site. Now you can see the bottom edge of the A312 here, which runs north to south, and via an underpass in this location here you can get direct access into Minette Country Park, which is only 3 or 4 minute walk from the from the edge of the application site via the subway into the park itself. This is the constraints plan, which would have been more helpful to put on screen, which shows the edges of Minette Country Park. This is the underpass that I was just referring to, and then the A312. So that highlights that there are no there are no site designations for the Avondale Drive estate. If we take you through the application, the proposal involves the demolition of all buildings on site, again in a hybrid manner, so it will be phased. There will be a full planning application in this area, which is the current area of the existing garages, so there is no displacement immediately of anyone from the site. The remaining phases will come through in this area under the outline permission, and will come through via reserve matters, which will be presented to committee. Confusingly, I think we have phases 1A, 1B and 2, and I will apologise if I do refer to them as 1, 2 and 3. But that is the phasing at the moment, or there are in effect 3 distinct phases. So these are the parameter plans which set out the detail for the outline phases. So we have maximum parameters, built forms, and the green area along the street frontage is the existing area of landscaping and some areas of proposed landscaping, which is really just buffer landscaping, which is encouraged because it does give some relief along Avondale Drive. We then have maximum building heights. At the moment, the height of the tallest building will not be exceeded, and I have that in a separate slide a little bit later on, but this will be the tallest element of the site. The remainder will be actually lower than the existing built form at the moment. Access and movement is a parameter plan, so we're looking at securing pedestrian movement through the application site, which doesn't exist at the moment, to connect to Hitherbroom Park. Hitherbroom Park will also be re-providing the area of playground that will be lost on the application site. So all of the equipment, etc., will be moved into the park for all residents to continue to enjoy. We have a hard and soft landscaping scheme. The green areas on site which are shown are all communal amenity spaces, so they're not open to the general public. So this application, apart from providing landscape buffer and areas of walkable play, there is no formal public open space on this application site. The applicant is, however, providing an in lieu contribution, which is permissible by the Planning Obligations SPD, and that will go towards enhancements, other enhancements in Hitherbroom Park and also Minette Country Park and other areas in the vicinity. We then have phase 1A. So this is the location of the existing garages. So there you can see that the existing block remains in situ while phase 1 is built. So all garages will be knocked down, and the first phase building will be put forward. This will be followed by building B and a shared communal amenity space in the centre. We have a proposed ground floor plan, so this isn't a podium block building unlike the last. It is a more L-shaped block here. In its form, it has a central glazed section or entrance lobby which provides visibility from street level all the way through to the new communal garden. There is a secondary access point here which would be access into the communal gardens. We have first floor plan. Did I miss the second? I've missed the second. I'm not sure where that is. The third floor plan, fourth floor plan, and then the proposed roof plan. So the form goes up through the building, and the only difference is that we actually have ground floor communal amenity space. If I take you back to the ground floor plan, one of the benefits of this scheme is that we've managed to negotiate gardens for some of those ground floor units, which is useful for accommodating some of those family units which also enjoy as existing some ground floor amenity. We have central cycle stores, a substation is located in the corner. We have worked quite hard in getting amendments to the design of this application, so the design has changed and improvements have been sought and negotiated with the applicants. So these are the proposed elevations. This is, I mentioned earlier, there is a glazed central lobby area which is the main entrance into the building, which I'm trying to highlight here. We then have sections of the proposed building. This is a bird's eye view which indicates that everything with this little grey, I guess it's a lift core, those are the residential blocks. So the smaller areas you can see in more centrally located are the areas of the single storey car parking, and this is phase 1, which is the garage block which will be demolished. Really sorry about the quality of these images. So this is the junction of Abbotswood Way and Avondale Drive. So you can see the sort of 1980s housing in the distance. This is the landscape buffer that we talked about earlier, and just out of view, or in this image here, you can see one of the 3 existing residential buildings. Now this estate is quite unique in that it comprises 144 existing residential units, but they are all 2-bedroom units. There are no 1 beds, there are no 3 beds, and there are no 4 beds. So it doesn't really provide a mix in terms of meeting housing needs. So we have 3 of these. This is a view from Minette Country Park. I did mention that this building has some very significant long-range views. Minette Country Park, I think, is visible from the London Borough of Ealing, and we have Avondale Drive street view. So we have the existing housing on the opposite side, which ranges from circa 3 to 4 stories in height. These are the existing car park blocks, which is why I refer to them as cages. They are visible, so it's useful to some extent, and then there is car parking internally provided. They have a very large parapet, and I'm not sure why, because there is no parking above. Storage or something. We have the garages, which form the area of phase number 1. So we did see someone on site last week who was still occupying his garage, but we are told that they are short-term or void lets. We have the rear juxtaposition of the existing application site with the Minette School playing field. So there is an existing road that runs along the back of the site adjacent to the school playing fields. This road will no longer exist in the future proposals. These will be the locations of some of those family gardens. Just for context, this image shows in blue the existing building heights of the Avondale Drive estate, and in these peachier colours are the proposed heights of the regeneration developments. So there is only one element here, which is it doesn't actually even meet the same height as the existing building. It is lower. Floor to ceiling heights will obviously be needing to meet modern day standards, so you probably have the same number of stories, you have less stories, but they will accommodate adequate building control requirements for floor to ceiling heights. So the mass has been dispersed, less centrally going upwards and more vertically across the site. These are some visuals, again, taken with a pinch of salt. So this is the view from Avondale Drive. So we have a lower built form in order to create a better relationship with the existing low-rise housing, which is on the southern side of Avondale Drive. This is the view of Abbotswood Way. And one of the things that we mentioned earlier was that there was a new route through the development site into Hillingdon Park, so this would be that proposed relationship, albeit these are indicative because this is the outline proposals, but the width of this area has been secured by virtue of the parameter plan, so it would always be that wide. It would provide only 9 car parking spaces on street along this area, so it has been we've tried our hardest to keep it as pedestrian friendly and car light as possible. And this is a view of the proposed detailed phase 1 block. So the application, as I mentioned, comprises of 144 existing units. That would then rise to a maximum parameter of 240 homes. So there is a net uplift of 96 units. We will then have a mix of units. So the one thing that is beneficial in this scheme is that they will not all be 2-bedroom units. I would like to highlight that there is a slight policy conflict insofar as we've been unable to secure as much family housing as we normally would, primarily because it's unviable to do so. There is also a requirement to facilitate the right to return for existing residents, so it's a fairly complicated model overall. We are aware that we're able to facilitate the right to return, and that has been promised by the applicant team, and we are securing overall approximately 16 to 17% 3 and 4 bed units. There is an argument to be made that that's better than the 0, 3 and 4 bed units that exist on site at the moment, but it does not meet sort of the 20 to 25% thresholds that we're trying to achieve across the borough in order to provide more family housing. So there are minor policy conflicts with this application, but we do have a suite of measures which fall as mitigation. We are providing, it would deliver 54.5% affordable housing by habitable room. Overall, the scheme delivers significant benefits, and subject to the Section 106 agreement, relevant conditions and the mayoral referral, it is recommended for approval. There is a addendum and a verbal update to clarify that TfL's Healthy Streets contribution, which is not within the committee report at the moment, is £51,000. So that was agreed earlier on today. And so let me just clarify which head of term I'm talking about. So head of term number 11, the Healthy Streets contribution is £51,000. So that's one less thing to have as delegated to James and the Labour lead and chairman to negotiate. I could run through some of the other verbal updates based on Austin Road. I'll let James go.
So, yes, I'll just be quick. So as Amanda mentioned, overall the scheme delivers significant benefits, particularly the delivery of high quality affordable homes, and again it's the new layout would create a safe and welcoming environment, and again in my view the many positive benefits of the proposals weigh heavily in favour of an approval recommendation. As per the earlier item, I'd like to have the delegated authority on the final wording of the parking permits head of term. I'd like to add the additional text to the lighting aspect of the landscaping condition, the food waste informative, and the reference to the overheating condition. I think they're the 3 carryovers. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I was just scribbling down there. Right, another very weighty scheme that you've had a lot of information presented to, so thank you to Mandip for taking us through that. We've heard from James. We can now go to members to debate what we've heard, and I had Councillor Higgins who's indicated. First off the block.
Thank you, Chairman. You forgot solar panel. We want to make sure that that's tightened up or come back to us in a better way. Apart from that, I think it's a much improvement. I think there's going to be issues, but overall I think this is quite a good scheme actually for the area, and to get rid of those horrible block would be fantastic. The report does say on page 141 about the applicant has failed to provide contribution to improvements. It's the last recommendation. I know that Mandip has covered most.
Sorry, just to probably just jump in. That's just a standard thing. In the very unlikely event that the applicant refuses to agree the Section 106 agreement, so that would be very unlikely to come into play.
That's what I was. Sorry, Joe. That's what I was trying to say. That this is a standard thing that we have in here, and not for us to go jumping up and down about all these bits and pieces. Okay, so that was what I was trying to be helpful rather than criticise you. On that note, I would actually go with Officer Regulation and propose this application. I'm sure there's a lot other people would like to say, but I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Higgins. Anybody else indicating to speak on this one? Councillor Cawthorne, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a couple of questions, then some further comments. Just picking up on the comment on page 187 relating to sustainable drainage and flood risk, there's a comment about non-compliance with London Plan policy. I assume that's picked up somewhere later in the narrative, and maybe I've not seen it, or perhaps it's conditioned somewhere, but I'd be interested in any of the comment on that, please. So that's my first question. Second one is around the phasing of the development. I assume that's based upon progress with the decanting of these sites, but again, an answer on that. And I think the only other thing I would say ditto my comments on the last application regarding food waste recycling. So obviously that's picked up already, so I won't go on about that. The point's made. But actually, just generally speaking, I think there's been an even greater level of support with this application, if not mistaken, on the ballot, which really is tremendous, because it's not a given that these are going to go through. In some places they don't, and the whole thing falls over. So it's important to once again compliment officers there, and again I support the application. Thank you.
Was that seconding, Councillor?
Let me second it for you. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Just for transparency and completeness, but a couple of points there. The flood risk comment that was included in the report, and just an overview of how the phasing is going to work.
Now, the comments on page 187 are those of the GLA. So that's the initial comments they provided at stage 1 a number of weeks ago now. So we feel that it's sufficiently covered by condition 29, but the GLA will probably delve deeper when they get to stage 2 when we refer the application back. But it has been dealt with and is satisfied by condition 29. Food waste has been dealt with. Now, phasing, I think the question was, are we happy that people are being rehoused? No.
That's not quite. Use my mind. The question was, I assume that the phasing of the development as proposed is influenced by the progress on decanting in the various blocks. That's right. Can you confirm, please?
Yes, one of the key drivers for this being the first phase is that they don't need, or the housing team won't need to immediately evict everybody from one of the blocks. So once this is up and running, there will be a decant proposed. There won't be as many units in the first phase, but some of them will go off-site, and that will assist in the phasing and decant process.
Super, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I did have a question, but Councillor Cawthorne's covered it, and I was also going to second it, and Councillor Cawthorne's covered it. So just to say, I think it's a very good scheme, so I'm more than happy to support it.
Okay, we'll let you and Councillor Cawthorne have that conversation after the meeting. Okay, Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Could we just, in condition 27, overheating strategy, include the same issue about communal areas? Otherwise, I do welcome that there are some larger family units here, and that the majority of people are in favour of it, which, as Councillor Cawthorne said, isn't always the case. So, yeah, happy to support it.
I think the consultation was over 90% of residents were in favour of it, so that's a very strong mandate to proceed. Okay. Any other councillors wishing to? Right. Well, we are moved and seconded, but before we get to that moment of voting, just want to pick the bones out of it so we know what we're voting on. The parking heads of terms we talked about, and that'll be the same as the previous one. We want to update the TfL Healthy Streets contribution. We want to include a line in the lighting condition for efficiency, and we want to include a line in the overheating condition around communal areas overheating. We also need to be adding an informative on the food waste. So an informative and a condition. Yeah. Solar panels. On the...
Sorry, through you, Chairman, on the last one we said we was going to strengthen it up a bit, that's all. We did something about, we were going to...
It was on the LED lighting.
No, so there was we haven't seen the plan of the solar panels on the previous one, and we haven't seen the solar where the solar panels are going to go on this one. So I want to make sure that we do see that.
Okay, Mandip, over to you on that one.
It's all contained within the energy strategy. I'm sorry, we don't obviously publish everything.
Yeah, no, I'm just through you, Chairman. All I'm just going to make sure is that it's there. I'm not going to ask you to take it all out and show me it, but yeah, that's all I know.
Yeah, I think if people do want to be leaving, thank you very much for sitting with us on those two applications. But we're just going to carry on that. If you could just ask if you just be a bit, sensitive when you're leaving. No whooping or anything, or clapping. So we will now go to agenda item 8, which is Keith House on the North Hyde Road in Hayes.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 8 is Keith House on North Hyde Road. Some of you might recall the application for Keith House West, which came to Planning Committee not that long ago. So Keith House West, for memory, it was a residential scheme. So there is an existing Yodel or storage and distribution warehouse on the site. We gave permission for the loss of that building and the delivery of a residential block on the western part of the site. This is an application for the eastern part of the site, which is proposing a circa 300 unit shared living accommodation scheme. So we have everything under the red line area. There is a slight area of overlap, but we'll talk about that when we run through the plans. So the application site was formerly a strategic industrial location. It was de-designated through the last local plan, so forgive that the plan hasn't been updated, but the application site is not designated employment land. It is still currently in use by Yodel, but I believe that's a short-term lease that's due to come to an end very soon. For context, this is the old vinyl factory site, so the brown that you have here are the heritage assets on the old vinyl factory site, so it's the His Master's Voice building, that you may or may not be familiar with. In this area to the south, we have, again, a former employment site, which used to be the former Safeway head offices. It's now called Hyde Park Hayes and comprises of numerous businesses, but also some retail further along to the south, which is the Asda, and I think there's a builder's merchant on the site from recollection, and a new hotel. So the application before us is to demolish the existing Yodel warehouse and utilise more of the surface level car parking to re-provide a shared living accommodation block. So the general arrangement is that at ground floor level, it will be primarily an L-shaped block. Now, I spoke earlier about there being an overlap between this application red line and the other, the Keith House West red line. So there is an area that is centrally located, that is shared and will deliver exactly the same proposal. So we have an area of public open space delivered at the northern end of the site. We have enhancements to what is an existing pedestrian thoroughfare, which leads you out onto Dawley Road, and the application site for Keith House West secured obligations to improve this, and Keith House East, so the current application, is equally delivering financial sums to improve the walking and cycling route along that stretch. We have some car club bays located in this facility here, so a betterment of the scheme is that we will also get some car club provision and encourage more people to be less reliant on their private cars. And we have an area of shared parking here which is primarily to serve some commercial units. So at ground floor level of both Keith House West and Keith House East there will be some commercial units, and that is in effect to provide for some of that employment land that has been lost as a result of the demolition, and they will have some car parking spaces here. There will also be an element of disabled car parking. Now, the car parking spaces, whilst they're shown as being laid out for everybody, they are actually demarcated within transport assessments, so we know which ones are for the Western development and which ones are for the Eastern development. We have a single new vehicular access point which is located at North Hyde Road. The current vehicular access is located more over to this end of the development site. So we were able to secure a single access rather than one to serve the shared living and one to serve the residential block. I know it might get quite confusing because I keep talking about Keith House West, but we are only considering Keith House East, so the shared living accommodation. We have existing site elevations, so we can see that the block is a fairly low commercial shed at present, but it is surrounded by significantly larger buildings, and those are the old vinyl factory buildings. Again, existing site context is that we do have much larger buildings within the site's parameters, not just those of the old vinyl factory, but also those at Hyde Park Hayes. We also recently granted permission for Hyde Park Hayes 4, which was a circa 8 to 9 storey building, which is a residential block across the road. Should have pointed that out earlier. We have existing elevations west and south, so again providing some context that this is an extremely low development within and pepper potted with larger buildings. Now, shared living is a model which is fairly new. No, let's put that a different way. We haven't seen it at planning committee, or I haven't presented it in the last few years. So this is a shared living block where we're proposing a significant area of shared communal amenity space. We have shared kitchens, shared libraries, shared actual outdoor amenity space, and so there are lots of facilities which are used by all of the future residents. Initially, the application proposed shared living predominantly located at ground and first floor levels. Through the application process, we've managed to negotiate that there is actually shared living provided at some of the upper floor levels. Our concern initially had been that if you lived on the 8th floor of the shared living block, would you bother going down to level number 1 to use the shared kitchen, or would you end up being quite secluded in your own shared accommodation facility? And as a result, in order to resolve those problems, we've secured more shared living facilities at higher levels, so to spread it out throughout the buildings. The application will also propose communal areas at ground and first floor level, so shared amongst all future occupiers. The units do not need to comply with the national standards for their area. They are shared living accommodation, but they are actually able to provide an adequate living environment for a shared living or communal living scheme. One other thing to note is that every single unit will be a single occupancy unit, so it will not be shared living for couples, it will solely be for single occupancy. Some of the larger units will be those which are for less able-bodied and disabled units. We have shared living at level 3, shared living at level 4, so we've managed to gain some communal, probably cooking stations and dining facilities for shared living facilities. And then at the uppermost levels, we have further communal amenity, both indoor and outdoor, to the benefit of the scheme. And then we have some solar panels actually shown on the plans, and also some additional rooftop amenity for the application site. We have some typical layouts of the private rooms. Here we have some elevations. Now, one of the nuances of shared living is that It has an affordable housing requirement, however it's not an on-site affordable housing requirement. So London Plan Policy H16 requires that shared living is to provide affordable housing, but in the form of a cash in lieu contribution. So we have managed to secure £3.2 million, which will be invested into schemes such as the Austin Road redevelopment, which is not a million miles from this application site. So it is fully policy compliant. We have had months of discussions about what that sum should be. So it has moved quite significantly from being quite a nominal sum to now being what we feel is comparable with other shared living schemes. We have also looked into a number of other shared living schemes and also some appeal decisions in order to make sure that we are comfortable that the size of the shared facilities are adequate for the size of the development. There was an initial concern that perhaps there wasn't enough shared amenity, but having looked at it and having negotiated some of the improvements, so there's further communal facilities at roof level and at level 4, we feel that the site is actually comparable, if not better, than some of the other shared living schemes within London. We are also aware that we obviously have a large site next to lots of existing residents. So there is a community investment programme which we are proposing to secure as part of the application, and that's to ensure that there is dialogue between the local community and the future provider to ensure that any issues are resolved and dealt with in a proactive manner. We have a suite of planning obligations that have been secured and are in the application. The proposal is a car light development. I obviously talked about the central area providing some car parking. Now there are only a nominal number of car parking spaces, namely 3 blue badge and 4 for the commercial properties, but we are securing car spaces, and the application site is a very, very short distance from Hayes and Harlington Station and numerous bus routes. If I take you through some of the images of the application site, this is quite useful in that we have an existing photograph and then we have had the applicant team superimpose the proposed development. So for context, that's the existing and then that's the proposed. It should be noted that obviously part of the Keith House West site would also be seen in the background, but that's not on these images, that's not under consideration. Here we have an image from with His Master's Voice building on the old vinyl factory site, and then some of the Crossrail works. You can see the faint outline of where the proposed building would be going, and so that's the context of the built mass that would be in its place. And then we have superimposed to assist the Keith House West. So the black is the residential building and the blue is the current proposal for shared living accommodation. I appreciate that it's only a wire line, but it's hopefully assisting in providing some context of the change in scale. This is a view with Hyde Park Hayes 3, so the prior approval from office to residential, and here just out of sight would be the location of Hyde Park Hayes 4 that we recently granted permission for, so the 8 to 9 storey building. And this is the application site, so the Yodel warehouse. And this is a view from the station, so looking back across the site, so you can make out that there would be a change to the skyline with the proposal in situ. This is along Dawley Road as you're exiting, I believe, the new hotel. So again, these are the 2-storey semi-detached properties on Keith Road, and this is the new proposed development in and out of sight. I know it appears quite significant in its scale, but it is in the context of some significant buildings on Hyde Park Hayes and across the railway lines at the old vinyl factory. The application is accordingly recommended for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Mandip. I think James is just going to give us a bit of insight.
I know councillors have received a promotional leaflet ahead of the meeting via the applicant. Just to clarify, the leaflet does correctly cross-reference a number of planning-related benefits of the scheme, but it does also reference some non-planning related benefits, such as an aspect of the scheme involving foster carers. Members should only put weighting on the planning benefits of the scheme when reaching their decision, and these are set out in detail in the planning report. Nonetheless, the planning benefits of the scheme do include a rather substantial Section 106 package as set out on pages 254 and 255. Members may also wish to note the support of the scheme from the Hayes Town Centre Partnership, and that's set out on pages 289 to 291 of the report. And then, as per the earlier item, I'd like to request delegated authority on the heads of terms relating to parking permits, which is actually 3 different heads of terms on this report, XII, XIV and XXV. Thank you, Chairman.
Good. No, thank you for that, James. Right, again, we've got no petition or applicants to be speaking on this one, so we can go straight to the debate. Councillor Higgins, you indicated.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a massive bedsit, really, isn't it? And it looks like the way Mandate was moving them in and out, it was like a spaceship that was ready, all the accommodation for all the pilots and everything. It disappears and it flies away in the sky. What's too much science fiction? But anyway, there you go. The only question I have, I mean, it's not my cup of tea, but I can see the attraction, and it's a new way of looking at accommodation, which is rather clever, to be fair. The only thing I'm concerned about is how you're going to police that there's only going to be one person that is residing in that unit. When it's indicated on the picture there, it looks like a double bed anyway. So that's my only real. I mean, I'm sure others will come up with some planning issues, but that's the only thing I'm sort of really concerned about is how they're going to, who's going to say, oh, you're not allowed to have that person in there, sort of thing. You only want to be one person. But apart from that, I would move it. Okay.
Thank you. So the point then around how do we ensure compliance with the occupancy standards?
The first point I'd say is that's not something you could cover through a planning condition, and for that reason, it is definitely ahead of term. I mean, this may not be a great answer. Obviously, what we'd be looking to, with regard to the legal agreement, is to try and ensure that particular head of term is worded as robustly as possible. So it may be at this point I pass down the table, if that's okay.
Nicole, it's been thrown your way by the looks of it.
Thank you, Chairman. There is a head of term 3, that's linked to the tenancy agreement, and one of the requirements is that it's leased to a single individual. Now, ultimately, in the legal agreement, we have the ability to, with notice to the owners, to go on site to ensure that the obligations are being complied with. If we find that they are in breach, we can clearly enforce the obligations, and there are various ways in which we can do that. And I won't seek to go into detail. I think you're very much aware of those. Ultimately, it will be a matter of working with the owner and those that are managing the property to ensure that they are making sure the obligations are complied with. So it's going to be a working relationship, I think, with the council to ensure. There's no, I mean, any lawyer can make the wording as strongly as possible, but ultimately we say you must ensure it's single occupancy, and then there should be compliance with that. The only addition that we may add is that we could have an agreement between management and the council to ensure, but ultimately the tenancy agreement does kind of cover that. So it's going to be a matter of working with the management agency or the owners to ensure that it's being complied with. So it's enforceable, but we're relying on the owners' occupancy. Well, yeah.
It's about the work, the ongoing, the working relationship going forward, I think is what you're saying there. Okay. Right, Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just condition 25 and overheating. Could we just put that thing in about the communal areas again, please? And do we know how successfully these are managed, these kind of units?
I'm not sure it's something we can consider as a planning committee, but any information on previous schemes elsewhere? I know the report talks about Harrow and places like that, isn't it? Yeah.
This isn't a type of property that I know well. I have visited the one in Old Oak Common a few times, where we hold there are some very interesting general planning meetings, and one of them have been held at the Old Oak Common in some of their meeting rooms. So from what I've observed, it's fairly well used, but also the communal facilities include things like a cafe space and breakout areas for you to work, and they were well used by what looked like fairly young individuals, younger than me, but that's the demographic that these buildings are catering for. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mathers.
Thank you. I think there's similar ones in Wembley. It's just like permanent uni student accommodation. No, absolutely, and that is part of my concern, and I'm sure you've looked into that as much as possible. I suppose my question was the impact on loss of the industry space, and what more can be done. I know only half the site's left, but what more can be done to ensure that not every building in that part of that roundabout is entirely housing, residential housing, and ensuring some mix and employability.
Okay, Mandip? I think there's much we can do there, isn't there?
There isn't a lot we can do now. Councillor Mathers, in 2014 we did a strategic release of certain areas of industrial land. So this was part of that release, and we were accounting for the loss of this facility when we de-designated it from strategic use. So it strengthens the other areas that remain in the designation. So to the north of Dawley Road, further north of Old Vinyl Factory, there remain designations of strategic industrial land, whereby we protect those a lot more vigorously because these areas have been de-designated. So we've secured some employment uses, and I appreciate it's nowhere in the region of what the current employment use is of the site at the moment. However, I think it's a policy decision that we took some years ago to de-designate this land from strategic industrial use.
Okay, thank you. James, do you want to come in at that point?
Because this is obviously a major scale development, I'm just thinking members may want to carry over some of the points from the previous two schemes in terms of housekeeping. In that regard, we did in the addendum amend the refuse storage to include food waste and refuse strategy. So I'd recommend we amend the condition and add the informative, so do both. And then we'd pick up the point on lighting that was raised before and the point on overheating that has already been referenced. So for clarity, it would be exactly the same as the two previous items, but with the change to the condition in this particular case. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, no, thank you. I'm looking around, not seeing any other members. Councillor Cawthorne.
Had indicated. I clearly hadn't caught your eye though, Chairman. So, there you go. A couple of points really. I mean, first of all, I echo what's been said about the management, and I take some encouragement from what Nicole said around that. Management organisations are of variable quality. We all know that, and where they're not of good quality, they cause issues. So I take some comfort from that. I did want to just pick up a little on what Councillor Mathers said about the employment land. I'm taking it from this there is no policy conflict. I wasn't quite sure from different points in the report, so that's probably a simple yes or no, hopefully, that one there. And my only other point, really, I suppose I'm curious about the community investment programme that's highlighted on page 253. Third paragraph down, it's talking about a final CRP would be secured by Section 106 legal agreement and weighs in favour of the scheme. So I wasn't quite sure what exactly that is and what its status is in relation to the application. If that makes sense, if that question makes sense, could I have an answer to that, please?
Okay. Do you want to pick those up, Mandip?
I'll start with the community question because I didn't write the others down. I'm so sorry. I'll let you remind me. So the community investment programme, so this is about looking to make connections between the application site and the general community. And I think it's probably born from some of the issues that we know arise as a result of shared living. So we have Article 4s in place around Brunel because conversion of existing properties into HMOs for student accommodation have their problems and have their troubles and need some controls. we have decided to control them by imposing a blanket Article 4 in wards to prevent them from coming forward. So the community investment programme is partly to deal with that relationship between the applicant and the local community. They feel that there is someone they can come to raise their concerns, to try and resolve their concerns. And it's also about making sure that the applicant is invested in the area and not just there to provide mass accommodation.
Thank you. So the maintenance of that is woven into any consent that may be granted then?
Yes.
Just to be clear. Thank you.
And the other point was around the employment land. Is there a policy conflict?
I will look into that now. Bear with me. Yes, so we do talk about there being a minor conflict insofar as there is a loss of non-designated employment land. However, that was almost done as a result of Keith House West. So there is almost a neutral position in terms of whether there's a policy conflict, because we've already done that. We've already I don't want to say sterilised because that's not a nice word, but we have almost let the site, the use of employment go some time ago. Thank you.
Sounds uncomfortable, but thank you.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Okay.
I'm not seconding anything.
Right. Does that address your points, Councillor? That address your points. Okay. Any other members wishing to speak on this? Okay. I do need to be seconded, but... Oh, Councillor Chapman. He beat you to it.
I beat you to it, Chairman. I'd like to second it. Thank you.
Well done on that. Okay. Right, we're just going to summarise where we are. So Nicole really helped us out with the tenancy header terms, and I think gave members some comfort that that's been addressed. We've got the parking heads of terms ×3 for this scheme to be delegated to James to finalise the wording. We are going to address the overheating condition 25 to include the communal areas, the lighting condition to include energy efficiency, and we've got two elements on the food waste, which is to add a condition to include food waste recycling, and also to add an informative. So a condition and an informative on food waste. Okay, so we're moved and seconded on that. Can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, agenda item 8, that's unanimous, and I can confirm, everybody, that is approved. Thank you very much. Right, this brings us to the final item this evening, which is, when I get to it, Stanford House on Nestles Avenue. We have seen this before. This is a deed of variation to the 106 agreement. Mandip, have you haven't got a big long slide pack for us, have you? I wouldn't think so, so maybe just an update on what members are going to be discussing and ultimately voting on.
Thank you. Now, this is a case that has been to committee, I think, twice in the last 3 months, so you are very familiar with it. It's a fully residential scheme. It was proposed to deliver, I think it was circa 26% affordable housing on site back in January, maybe February planning committee. The application site has now has changed hands from the previous owner to Shepherd's Bush Housing, or a registered provider, apologies, and they are proposing to convert the entire block to 100% affordable housing. That is the proposal before us that the officers are recommending approval of. The one nuance is that I mentioned earlier that affordable housing has a nil contribution towards SIL, so we are seeking planning obligations to secure some health contributions for to put into the health pot. The application is recommended for approval and supported by the Council's policy and housing officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I had Councillor Higgins just pipped you to it there, Councillor Duncan, but you are a close second. Councillor Higgins.
I would love to propose this. Thank you very much. I think it's wonderful. That's proposed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Yes, I'm very pleased to see this and see the provision again for 3-bed units. We've got another 6 units, so yes, happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're proposing seconded. Can I have a show of hands for this one, please? So that's unanimous. Agenda item 9 this evening is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Right, that brings us to the end of this evening's major planning applications meeting. I'd like to thank viewers watching on YouTube, those that were here with us earlier, and officers who supported us, and of course members who have been very, very diligent and very, very detailed in their scrutiny this evening. So thank you very much for everybody for their contribution, and I wish everybody who's watching us on YouTube a good evening. We will close down now. Thank you very much.